what really matters at the end of life? I mean, when we're facing our own mortality.
Well, it's a question that Atul Gawande really grapples with in his book, Being Mortal.
Right. And he's coming at it from such an interesting perspective, as a surgeon.
Exactly. He's seen firsthand the limitations of modern medicine, especially when it comes to aging and death.
So in this deep dive, we're going to explore some of those insights, really delve into the challenges of aging and how we approach end-of-life care.
And he starts with these two really contrasting stories about aging, right? Like his grandfather in India who lived to be over 100 years old.
Yeah, Setaram.
Yeah.
Living in this multi-generational household surrounded by family.
And then you have his wife's grandmother, Alice, living a very independent life in America.
And I think those two stories really highlight how much things have changed,
Absolutely. Modernization, shifting social structures.
It's like we've gone from this idea of elders being revered, their wisdom valued,
to this emphasis on the independent self.
which can be great. But it also presents challenges when we need care and support.
Especially as we age. And Gawande really doesn't shy away from the realities of physical decline.
Oh, no. He describes it so vividly. The teeth darkening, the heart working harder.
All those little things that start to add up.
And it can be unsettling, right? Because it's like a reminder of our own mortality.
I think so. And it's interesting because he connects it to this theory by Leonid Gavrilov about how humans age like complex systems.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It is. Over time, the backups fail, leading to this kind of increasing frailty.
Which I guess makes sense. You can feel fine one day and then suddenly, boom, you have a fall or an illness hits you.
Right. It's not always a gradual decline.
And that brings us to this whole issue of medicine's struggle with mortality.
Oh, absolutely.
He has this story about an 85-year-old patient, Jean Gavrils, with so many health problems, and the doctors are struggling to address her overall well-being.
Yeah, they're so focused on treating individual ailments that they kind of miss the bigger picture.
Like they're treating the trees but missing the whole forest.
Exactly. And that kind of speaks to this lack of focus on geriatrics in general, right?
Totally. And then there's the story of Chad Bolt, the geriatrician whose program was shut down because of funding issues.
Which is heartbreaking because it shows where our priorities are. We're so focused on extending life, but what about the quality of that life?
It's exactly the question Gawande is asking. Like, what does it mean to live a good life as we age?
It's not just about living longer. It's about living well.
And that can be hard to define, right?
Yeah.
What does living well actually look like?
He uses the story of this couple, Felix and Bella Silverstone, to kind of illustrate this.
Oh, yeah, tell me about them.
Felix has Parkinson's disease, and he relies heavily on Bella for care. It shows the challenges of caregiving, the emotional toll, the need to have realistic expectations.
It must be so difficult for both of them. And it makes you think, what would I want for myself in that situation?
It does. And how do our priorities shift as we get older?
Yeah, Gawande even talks about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that idea that we're striving for self-actualization.
But then he brings in Laura Carstenson's research showing that actually as we age, our priorities often shift. We start to value social connections and those simple everyday joys more.
Which makes total sense. If you realize time is finite, you're going to appreciate things differently. It's less about climbing the ladder and more about savoring the view.
Exactly. And that leads to one of the book's most thought-provoking questions. How do we define a good life as we get older?
And how do we make sure our choices are aligned with that definition?
Right. And Gawande makes a really compelling case for shifting our focus away from simply extending life to a more holistic approach, taking the individual's wishes and values into account.
So how does he suggest we actually do that? What are some of the concrete steps he outlines?
He talks about this program called the Eden Alternative. It was developed by Bill Thomas, and it's pretty amazing.
What's the idea behind it?
Basically, they transformed a nursing home by bringing in plants, animals, even children.
Wow, so they're creating this vibrant, engaging environment for the residents.
Yeah, it's a complete departure from the sterile institutional settings we usually associate with nursing homes.
I bet it had a huge impact on the residents.
It did. They became more active, their mood improved, and even their medication use decreased.
It really shows the power of purpose and connection even later in life.
Definitely. And it actually connects to something the philosopher Josiah Royce talked about, loyalty.
Interesting. How so?
Royce believed that we need a cause beyond ourselves to find meaning in life.
It could be family, a community, even caring for a pet.
Exactly. Gawande encourages us to find those causes, those things we're loyal to that give our lives purpose. It's a great question to ask ourselves no matter what age we are. What are we loyal to, and how does that loyalty shape our lives?
It's a powerful thought. And then, Gawande doesn't shy away from the really tough stuff, like what happens when we're facing death. He shares this heart-wrenching story of Sarah Monopoly, a young mother diagnosed with terminal lung cancer.
It's such a difficult situation, and it highlights the struggle between hope and acceptance. That feeling of wanting to fight for every moment, but also finding peace with the inevitable.
It's something we often avoid talking about, but Gawande argues that we need to have these conversations.
For sure, it's important for both patients and their families.
He criticizes that do something, fix something mentality in medicine.
Oh, yeah. He says it can lead to unnecessary interventions that just prolong suffering instead of improving quality of life.
So what does he suggest instead?
He talks about being honest about death and dying, and considering things like palliative care.
Which focuses on managing pain and making the patient comfortable, right?
Right. It's about focusing on quality of life rather than curing the disease.
Mm-hmm.
He even mentions this idea of concurrent care, where you receive palliative care alongside other treatments.
So it's not like you have to choose one or the other.
Nope. You can still get treatment aimed at extending your life while also focusing on comfort and well-being.
I didn't realize that was an option.
It is. And studies have actually shown that it can be beneficial in a lot of ways. Like, it can improve quality of life, reduce unnecessary medical costs, and even sometimes prolong life.
It seems so obvious when you think about it, but it's often overlooked.
It is. And it's interesting because Gawande also shares his own personal experience with his father's terminal illness.
Yeah, his father was a surgeon too, wasn't he?
He was. And as his condition worsened, they had to make some tough decisions about whether to pursue aggressive treatment or focus on palliative care.
It must have been incredibly difficult for the whole family.
Absolutely. Gawande talks about those challenges, but he also highlights the importance of family support and open communication during those times. He reminds us that even in the face of loss, there can still be grace and connection.
It's a reminder that even in the most difficult situations, those moments of connection can make all the difference.
They really can. And it kind of ties back to that central idea in being mortal, recognizing our limits, accepting our humanity, and finding ways to live fully even as we approach the end.
It's such a profound message. We're not just bodies to be fixed. We're individuals with our own hopes and fears and values, and those things matter even in the face of death.
Exactly. And towards the end of the book, Gawande brings up a psychological principle that really sheds light on how we perceive and remember experiences, especially at the end of life. He calls it the peak end rule.
Okay, tell me more about that. What's the peak end rule all about?
It basically says that we remember experiences based on their most intense points and how they ended.
Oh, interesting.
So, think about a vacation. You're more likely to remember that stunning view from a mountaintop or that amazing meal you had.
Than like the hours you spent on the plane or in the car, right?
Exactly. Even if those travel bits were kind of a drag, it's the peaks and the endings that stick with us, not necessarily the whole experience.
I can see that. So how does that apply to end-of-life care?
Well, if we want to create positive memories, both for ourselves and the people we love, we need to focus on making those last moments meaningful.
And making sure the ending is as peaceful as possible.
Right. It really highlights the importance of those small things, like sharing a laugh, listening to a favorite song, just holding someone's hand. Those gestures can have a lasting impact.
They really can.
Yeah.
It's not just about the medical care. It's about that emotional and spiritual connection.
Absolutely. Encouraging people to express their feelings, listening to their stories, helping them find peace. Those are all crucial parts of compassionate end-of-life care.
And Gawande also talks a lot about autonomy, right?
Yeah.
That even as our bodies decline, we still have the right to make choices about our care.
He is a huge advocate for that. Respecting people's wishes, even if they seem a little unconventional to others, it's about empowering individuals to decide what a good life means for them and make choices that align with their values.
Even at the end of life.
Exactly, because what might seem like a good outcome to one person could be completely unacceptable to someone else.
So we need to have those open and honest conversations to really understand what matters most to each individual.
For sure. And it means moving away from that old model where doctors just dictate everything. We need a more collaborative approach where patients and families are actively involved in decision-making.
Okay, so that all makes sense in theory, but how do we actually put this into practice in our own lives?
Well, Gawande gives us some concrete suggestions. He says we should have those open and honest conversations with our loved ones about our wishes for end-of-life care.
Which can be really hard to do, but so important.
They are. And he talks about advanced care planning, like writing down your preferences, choosing a healthcare proxy who can make decisions for you if you're not able to.
And it's not just about the paperwork, right?
No, it's about figuring out what truly matters to you and communicating those values to your loved ones.
Being Mortal is such a powerful book. It really makes you think about things in a different way.
It does. It's a bit of a challenge to read, but ultimately I think it points us towards a more compassionate and humane approach to aging and dying.
And what do you think is the most important thing for listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I hope people will be inspired to have these important conversations, to think about their own values and priorities and make choices that reflect what truly matters to them.
Not just at the end of life, but throughout life.
Exactly. Guan reminds us that we're all mortal and that shared experience can actually be a source of connection and meaning.
That's a beautiful thought. It's a book that really stays with you. I think anyone who wants to live more meaningful life and navigate those inevitable transitions with grace should read Being Mortal.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.